Welcome to the latest installment of the Sharp Best Ball Show on the Sharp Angles Podcast Network. I'm your host, Tod Burros, and today I'm joined by Jared Smola of Draft Sharks. Jared is a well-versed best ball guy, as well as being good at pretty much everything related to fantasy football, and I'm really looking forward to picking Jared's brain. This show is sponsored by Underdog Fantasy and the biggest fantasy football tournament of all time, Best Ball Mania 4. Don't know what Best Ball is? It's simple. You just enter Best Ball Mania on Underdog's slick mobile app, draft your team, and that's it. Yep, it's set it and forget it as Underdog optimizes your lineup weekly to create the highest scoring one. It's here. It's Best Ball Mania 4. And it's your shot at a first place prize of $3 million. And if you get signed up on the underdogfantasy.com or the app, use the code SHARPKIT. And not only will they double your first deposit up to $100, but you'll also receive the Sharp Football Draft Kit for just $1. That includes over 40 exclusive fantasy football articles, which will help your chance at winning the $3 million grand prize. That's Underdog Fantasy promo Sharp Kit. All right, let me bring in Jared. Jared, how are you today?
Todd, I'm doing good. It's good to talk with you again. I think I definitely respect your game, and I think we have similarities of how we attack fantasy football, but I think we have some differences too, which I like. I like talking with people that attack the game differently than me because I think I learn more from guys like you than guys who are kind of coming at it from the same angle that I am.
Well, I think that's the beauty in life, right? You have your way of doing it, and it's also the challenge in life because you don't want to be so dogmatic about your way that you're not open to new information, while at the same time you have to fight off being pushed around by others' opinions.
Yes.
And it to me, that's the hardest part of this whole thing. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I totally agree. You got to find the right balance, right? You want to soak up and adjust to new information, but not, get off your priors too much. Because, I spend way too many hours in, February and March kind of laying the foundation for the season. And honestly, I try to stick with those takes for the most part, because I think all the stuff we hear in May and June and all the training camp stuff and all the preseason stuff, I think more often than not, it can sway you in the wrong direction. But there's definitely situations where you do want to adjust to that new information.
Yeah, for me, it's more, I'm always willing to change my opinion. Of course, nothing will come to my old brain right now of how I've swapped this year, but I have. But what I found is the enemy is our own brain. In other words, as long as I take the time to analyze the information and make an informed decision, I'm good with either one. Where I get mad at myself is when I allow something to push me without really taking the time to analyze it and do due diligence on it, or vice versa. If I just go, that guy's going to be a bust. And unfortunately, life is one of the hardest teachers, Jared. But speaking of teaching, the Sharp Football book, Warren Sharp's book that comes out every year that goes over all the team tendencies, strength of schedule, and all that good stuff, is going to be released in the next few days. Keep an eye out on your Sharp Football network. Also, I think it's about $20, $25. Unfortunately, we won't know till right up until the time it's released what is going to be the final. But it is one of the most in-depth things that you can find, and it will be out on Amazon. So keep a lookout for that. Jared, back to the point that I was making. Do you feel similarly that it's about our process internally more than anything else?
For sure. I think that's what you want to be refining, right? Is your process. And I learned from guys like you, again, that do it a bit differently than me. I kind of adopt some of your stuff into my process to hopefully make my process better. But I'll tell you one guy that I've changed my opinion on, and I think we're going to talk about him today. So maybe we don't need to go too deep into him yet. But it's Greg Dulcich, who I was kind of off early in the offseason because it sounded like Sean Payton was kind of off Greg Dulcich when he talked about him at the combine. But Peyton has talked about Dulcich more recently, and he seems genuinely excited about him. So I'm excited about Dulcich as well now.
I enjoy Dulcich tones. I was on him because I love when talented people get pushed down because of a blurb. And that's what it seemed like to me. So I've been filling my bags with him. Jared, I've seen you posting some really good best ball thoughts on Twitter. Tell us, what sites do you play on? And what type of volume do you play on each site that you play?
Yeah, definitely Underdog. And I'm not just saying that because they sponsor the show. I do think that's, it's my favorite app to actually draft on. And the Best Ball Mania stuff is awesome, but they also have a lot of the other smaller tournaments, which I definitely try to get into. So I'm on Underdog. I'm on FFPC for sure. I'm going to get into drafters more this year as well, especially their, flagship tournament. That's full PPR, so it's a bit different than Underdog. The format's a bit different on drafters. There's no playoff weeks. It's just straight total points week 1 through 17. So I'm going to try to diversify a bit in my contest types by playing on drafters this year.
Yeah, I actually got approached by them to work with them a couple years ago, and then he called me back like the next day and said, "Oh, by the way, we're not eligible in Pennsylvania. Will that change the way you feel?" I'm like, "Yes, yes. I would like to actually be able to play on the site that I promote." But really nice guys. I am much more intrigued by this new contest on Underdog, this weekly winners. I went from being, oh God, no, not another one, to shifting large parts of my Underdog budget to that format because I think it is, it's kind of like when Captain Mode came out for DFS.
Yeah.
Where it was so different that the time in you could get an edge. And I think I found an edge. My article this week, if you go to Sharp Football, is on weekly winners and how I'm approaching it. You can also follow it on my Twitter feed. So I'm really interested in that. You and I both love FFPC. We play a lot of that. What are some of the key things, though, on Underdog that you try and think about when you're drafting, be it roster construction, exposure? What are some of your big picture thoughts about playing on Underdog Fantasy?
Well, my first thing on Underdog, this year specifically, I'm needing to force myself to draft more early wide receivers. Just the landscape this season is crazy with how wide receivers are flying off the board. I could easily start drafts with 3 running backs regularly, and I'm doing that sometimes. I don't want to have all my teams, RB star. I do think, that's where kind of the value has been early in Underdog draft because it's half PPR. I think that goes, I don't know if overlooks the wrong word, but probably understated how the fact that it's only half PPR kind of impacts how the running backs compare to the wide receivers. But so that's kind of the first thing I thought of when you asked this. Otherwise, I don't have anything groundbreaking to share in terms of best ball theory. I actually think, I'm not going to say best ball has been solved, but like best ball draft rooms are way more efficient now than they were 3 years ago in terms of the majority of teams building rosters the right way, stacking teams, game stacking, these playoff weeks. So I almost want to say, I feel like best ball is starting to come full circle where, 10 years ago you could win in best ball with good player takes, with good rankings. And then you kind of, had to start doing the correct roster constructions and stacking and doing all the, best ball theory type stuff correct. But where now I think we're heading back in the direction where, you got to still do the theory stuff right. I think, again, it's efficient enough where you're going to have to start nailing players or maybe even teams at minimum, to start, winning long-term in best ball.
Yeah, I've been successful profit-wise the last 2 years in best ball, getting into the finals in each year in the FFPC. But my player takes left a lot to be desired from my own perspective. and I've put in a lot more effort. I think as you get older, it's harder to dig as much. I've outsourced some of it. Like I'm going to have Matt Harmon on in a couple weeks because he's great at wide receivers. I tend to be great at running back evaluation, rookies. I tend to be really good there, not as good anywhere else. And there were a couple other key things that I was lacking that I'm trying to get better at, Jared. One thing I will say is ADP tends to be very efficient within player groups, but every year, you mentioned how wide receivers are going earlier. I do think that as a group, we tend to overreact to what happened the year before. And that determines when the quarterbacks go, when the running backs go, when the wide receivers go. And it's such a small sample size, Jared. I do think that opens up opportunities for guys like us.
Totally with you there. I think that, the whole zig while everyone else is zagging tends to work. And I know, zero running back crushed it last year. I think it was the year prior, zero running back teams generally struggled. So this stuff goes in cycles. As you said, NFL, fantasy football in general, everything we do is small sample size. So it's dangerous to weigh what we saw last year too heavily. And we're talking about anything, whether it's roster construction or individual player take. So always keep that in mind. I think you can definitely gain an edge by just realizing how fragile a lot of this stuff is.
Yep. And to not follow the crowd as much. I do know that a lot of it is a feel for me. And if I get to the 10th, 11th round where the wide receivers fall off and I don't have 5 of them, I know I'm not going to really be happy with that draft. That means I'm probably going to have to go 10 wide receivers and be fragile at other places. And it doesn't always work out the way you want it to. So I do feel like there is a big element of what you're saying there. Let's move on, though, a little bit. You guys did an article recently on Draft Sharks, which talks about what position is best to draft out of this year, meaning position 1, position 2, position 12 in a draft. Now, we don't get the choice. The optimizer tells us what that is, but I do think it's interesting, and I would like to know what your research showed.
Yeah, and this is obviously fluid, right? As ADPs change and even as our projections and rankings change, like the best draft position might end up changing. So I'll probably end up updating that article a few times before the start of the season. But I did look at that. I did look at answering that question in 2 ways. The first way was just going straight down ADP and saying, like, if you pick one, you're going to get this guy in the first, these 2 guys at the 2-3 turn, these 2 guys at the, at the 4 or 5 turn. I did it that way. And then I also did it looking at, based on our projections at Draft Sharks, kind of the optimal team you could build from each draft spot. I think, to me, that way is more interesting. And obviously, if you have different projections, different rankings, your answer is going to change. But, for us, with our projections at Draft Sharks, it was not the 1 pick that came out tops. It was actually the 9 pick in PPR. It was the 7 pick in half PPR. And again, a lot of that is just our projections and who you can kind of get early on. Like, in PPR, by our numbers, landing Saquon Barkley and then Amon-Ra St. Brown with your first 2 picks is like an unbelievable start. In half PPR, picking from the 7th spot, you can start Tyreek Hill and Derrick Henry. That kind of comes out as a huge start based on our projections. So again, I don't want people to look too heavily into this, because again, I do think it's fluid and it is based on our numbers. But it was interesting that those kind of middle-ish spots, even middle late, were kind of coming out as the optimal spots to pick this year.
That leads me to an off-topic question. So one thing, especially early, we tend to be slaves to ADP, right? You're only picking typically from a very small 1, 2, or 3 person pool. How much would you be willing, if you ended up at a spot that you didn't like as much, how much would you be willing to kind of force it, and what round would you force it?
As far as reaching past ADP for guys?
Yeah, to be different.
Yeah.
In other words, if I know I'm at a disadvantage in the 5 spot, right?
Yep.
And I take, in the first round and the second round, the best 2 guys there. But the reason you rated it as being subpar was you're really not getting great guys in the 3rd and the 4th.
Yep.
Would you, push up people
Yeah.
that you like more, or even guys you have even, just to kind of try and change that dynamic that you're seeing?
I mean, I do think the answer depends on it. It goes back to how many drafts you're doing, right? Because if you are doing 150 of these, like, you're gonna get quote unquote lucky in some drafts where guys are going to fall to you. But, even for me, like when I'm doing a higher stakes draft where I know I'm not going to have, 50 teams at this price point, I'm definitely willing to reach, and I'm willing to reach as far as I am. I don't know what the exact number is, but I'm 90% sure this guy is not going to make it back to me at the next pick. Right. So if I'm picking in the middle of round 2 and this guy's ADP is late round 2, I'm pretty damn sure he's not going to get back to me in the middle of round 3. So I'm willing to reach and just take him and get the guy who I think is the best player available, even if it's, 5 or 6 spots ahead of ADP.
I think that's great advice. I mean, I'm stupid enough that even in the $125 contest on FFPC, last year I had 60 of my own and another 15 with partners or so. The year before, even more. So I'm more willing to wait, be patient, and not push it. But I always tell people, if you're doing less than 25 drafts, definitely go get your guys. Yes. Because there's nothing worse than spending a lot of money and taking guys you really don't like just because ADP tells you. Because if it doesn't go well, you're really going to hate yourself.
And to me, that goes back again to the player takes and the player evals and just having. I mean, I know how much time I spend on that stuff. I have confidence in my player takes. Like I'm willing to bet on myself as far as that goes. So again, even if it means reaching, I'm fine doing that.
Yeah, I like that. So you also did an article recently about your top 7 players to pick on Underdog. Give us some of the guys on that list.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you, I guess, one at each position if you want.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. So my highest owned quarterback right now in Underdogs is Justin Herbert. I definitely buy the. You want an elite quarterback in that format for those 30-point weeks they can give you, what you kind of do need if you're going to win the whole thing late. I just think Herbert is the best relative value among those elite quarterbacks. His underdog ADP is still in the middle of round 5 right now. That really hasn't moved in a while. Herbert only finished quarterback 8 last year, but a lot went wrong for him. Mike Williams, Keenan Allen missed a ton of time. Herbert's touchdown rate last year, his passing touchdown rate way down, 3.6%. That was 21st in the NFL, down from 5.7% the previous year. That's going to bounce back. He's too good. The offense is too good. He just got unlucky in the touchdown department last year. I think people are forgetting about that rib cartilage injury that he suffered earlier in the year. I think that played a part in what was a relatively disappointing season. Then you add Quentin Johnston. It's a great top 3 wide receiver for now. You get what I think is going to be a pretty big upgrade at offensive coordinator with Kellen Moore. So I'm really just in on the Chargers in general. And, Herbert's obviously a big part of that.
Let me jump in on that one because I agree with you. The other 2, I'm not going to repeat what you said, but I agree with all of it. But 2 things I always try and do. One is last year's hype monster who underperformed. Yes. Is often a great pick the following year, and Herbert fits that bill. Second, one other key factor that I'm sure but didn't hit on is the upgrade at offensive coordinator to Kellen Moore. So I agree with you. Let's hear your running back.
So let's talk Cam Akers. I don't know. I feel like he's polarizing. I'm in on Cam Akers. I know it's obviously been a rocky start to his NFL career. The Achilles tear in 2021 kind of being the pinnacle of that. But he showed
that was a real acre.
Sure was. I can always count on you for the dad jokes, Todd.
Yep.
I think Akers showed flashes of strong production before the injury, and then he showed flashes late last season. Over the final 6 games of last season, 17.3 carries, 85 rushing yards per game for Cam Akers. He was 4th among all running backs in fantasy points over that span, was efficient, 4.9 yards per carry, fared really well in missed tackles forced and PFF elusive rating, all that kind of underlying metrics that I like to look at. And I just look at Sean McVay's history. He has a tendency to ride a feature back. Obviously, Todd Gurley had the big seasons with Sean McVay, but even post Gurley, it hasn't been one running back that's been the feature back, but like in spurts, we've seen guys get, consistently 15 to 20 touches per game. And that's been Akers. Again, we saw him get that type of work before the Achilles injury. We saw it last year post Achilles injury. And, just look at that backfield. There's just not much else there. So I think the Rams are kind of willing to, give Akers another shot, at least one more season to, prove he can kind of, be their bell cow.
Yeah. You've turned me around on him. He's one of those guys. You ever have those guys who are just itching at you? Like you're not clicking them, but they're itching because you could be wrong. Yep. Akers is one of those guys for me. And I mentioned how if I don't get a wide receiver, the right amount of wide receivers in the first 10 rounds, and then I like guys who go around him like Dameon Pierce. So yep. I don't disagree. He's a guy that I need to get more to balance my portfolio. Let's move on to your wide receiver.
I got to go Tyler Lockett here, who I think is the most underpriced wide receiver. Sold. We're good.
So
it's easy. It's easy. I mean, the guy, I got the number. He hasn't finished worse than wide receiver 24 in half PPR points per game in any of the last 5 seasons. And he's wide receiver 34 in Underdog ADP right now. So it's easy.
I mean, to me, the fact that JSN is going ahead of him is a sin that will be reaped upon those who partake in it. And I mean, it could work out. Anything could work out.
Sure.
I have to force myself to take some JSN because of if Lockett or Metcalf get hurt, JSN could more than pay off that. But for now, to me, when you look at these ADPs, DK Metcalf at 28.7 is a hard click for me. A rookie who barely played last year as a senior in college at 63 and Lockett at 64. I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer to load up on Lockett now. And then, Jared, we always in camp, you get these, JSN is running with the third team, the whole rookie thing. I'm hoping a buying opportunity does open up on JSN. But I'm with you completely on Lockett. Let's move over to tight end.
David Njoku is my guy at tight end. And it's largely because I'm just in on the Browns passing game, which we can talk about if you want. I just think everything sort of points to a kind of a breakout for that passing game this season. I think Njoku is going to be a big part of that. He really had a nice 2022 season that was kind of interrupted by some injuries. He missed 3 games and most of a 4th. But his scoring average in his 13 healthy games would have been 8th among tight ends. He saw an 18.5% target share in those healthy games, which is a really strong number for a tight end. And listen, this guy, he's still only 26 years old. He's been around for, I think he's 5 years now. He came into the NFL so young. He's still only 26. He's a freak athlete. The Browns gave him that 4-year, $55 million extension last offseason, so they committed to him as a big part of the passing game. Even with the arrival of Elijah Moore and they add Cedric Tillman, like that, it's a good wide receiver core. But I just think Njoku is locked in as a big part of that passing game.
Yeah, I agree. I was on him more early, and I've been loading up on Elijah Moore.
Yeah.
And Moore, again, it's not that I don't like Njoku. It's that whole philosophy of playing the whole draft board. And there's so many late tight ends I like. And I like Dulcich so much. But Deshaun Watson is my number 1 owned quarterback. Maybe him and Dak. Go.
Watson's my second highest owned quarterback.
Who's your first?
Herbert.
Yeah, I like Justin Fields too much to have Herbert as my number 1, but I do like Herbert a lot. So I agree with you on your larger point on the Cleveland Browns. So you're out on George Kittle and in on Greg Dulcich. Two opinions I agree with for traditional best ball. Why are you out on Kittle, in on Dulcich? And are you, like me, interested in Kittle in the new weekly winners format, where you don't have to, where you can maybe gain his spike weeks?
Yes. Yeah, I'm so out on Kittle that it's scary. I didn't look before we started. I don't think I've drafted him a single time this offseason. It's just I don't like him. I like 3 or 4 of the tight ends going behind him in ADP over Kittle straight up.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of reasons I'm on a Kittle. I mean, the touchdowns last year were unsustainable. Career high 11 touchdowns. It was an 18.3% touchdown rate. That's like more than double the league-wide tight end average touchdown rate. It's like triple Kittle's average over his first 5 NFL seasons. Outside of the touchdowns, Kittle last year, his catches per game and yards per game were his fewest since 2017, which was his rookie season. His target share was his lowest since his rookie season. I'm not sure that bounces back with McCaffrey there now for a full season, along with Debo and Ayuk. Kittle's Pro Football Focus receiving grade and yards per route run, those were both his lowest since his rookie season. He turns 30. I think it's in August. He's had a ton of injuries. Like, I'm not saying the guy's done, but I do think we've seen the best of George Kittle. And again, with all the target competition there in what's still going to be a run-leaning offense, right? I mean, I think they're going to finish – the Niners will finish in the bottom half of the league in pass rate. I feel pretty comfortable projecting that. So now the weekly winners, that's a great point. Like, I'm going to get into that, and I'm going to take a ton of George Kittle and get my exposure there because, he throughout his career, he has been a super spike week player. And I do think that can continue. There will be weeks where, he's kind of the focal point of the Niners game plan, and, he will have those spike weeks. So that's a perfect format to draft George Kittle.
Yeah, I've got about 30% Dulcich, which is higher than I normally have because I expect I won't be getting as much of him once people see how involved he is.
Yep.
Kittle, again, the word you learn so much in life through failure. And I have always overlooked the chance of injury. So I've started adding, I asked a couple of people on Twitter about this. Purdy is, the people who are saying what about Purdy is, I'm like, yeah, but you got to overpay for all of his assets, right?
Yeah.
I think each one of the Niner assets are overrated for where they're going. But I've started taking them anyway because if one of them gets injured, and all 3 of them have been injury prone, then all of a sudden now the other guys that are left over are going to be well worth it. So that's my only counterpoint to you having 0 Kittle. You could learn to regret that if Debo goes down.
Yes, I probably should start mixing him in, but again, I might end up with a ton of him in this weekly winners contest, and just again sort of get my exposure to him that way.
I've been willing to take him, Pitts, and Waller, 3 guys that I like a lot, a round and a half earlier in that format because I know I'm only going to take one a lot of times in that format. So I'm willing to ensure that I get one that I really can get a spike week out of. Jared, game stacking, as you know, is still all the rage for week 17 when these tournaments end. What are some of your favorite non-Cincinnati KC and Miami-Baltimore games? Because everyone's on those 2 games.
Yeah, I actually have an article up on Draft Sharks where I rank the Week 17 matchups for best ball game stack value. I do have the Chiefs Bengals 1. I have Miami-Baltimore 3. Detroit Dallas is my number 2. My second favorite.
I should have thrown them in, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so it's obvious. All right. I mean, that game does have the highest projected total of Week 17. At least it did as of like 2 weeks ago. Last I looked, it's higher even than the Bengals Chiefs game.
The pricing on the players, all the Cowboys are pretty cheap.
Yeah, they are. And I have some Brian Schottenheimer concerns with Dallas, but I'm definitely willing to at least take them as part of that game stack. Beyond that, I like the Jets-Browns game. Again, and it's largely because I'm in on the Browns offense. Even Nick Chubb, I've been drafting more this year than I have the previous few years. Then the Jets, obviously, kind of an easy team to target. I even think Breece Hall in a format like Underdog, if he delivers this season, it's probably going to be over the second half of the year and in those money weeks in the playoffs. So I like taking Breece Hall in round 3 and then stacking him up with a bunch of Browns. I've also been game stacking the Cardinals Eagles quite a bit. The Eagles, that team's easy to stack, right? I mean, it's Hurts with either one of the top 2 wideouts or Goddard. I like Rashaad Penny quite a bit too. I think he's on my list somewhere to talk about this show if we have time. And the Cardinals are just so cheap. I mean, Kyler Murray. I think Kyler Murray is a great pick in these best ball tournaments right now. I get he's probably going to miss the first 4, 5, 6 weeks of the season, but again, same deal with Breece Hall. Like Kyler's going to be his healthiest at the end of the season when you want those spike weeks. So as your second or even third quarterback in best ball, I think Kyler is a great pick. And again, most of his weapons are very cheap.
He went from being undraftable to me in early best ball. He was going like 8th, 9th round to almost every draft. I at least think about him because he's too cheap. So once again, you prefaced this at the beginning of the show saying you and I tend to think similarly, even though we don't talk much. I think that is very true. So here's my 2. And one I know you have to agree with, the Chargers and the Broncos.
Yes.
You've got Justin Herbert. We like Dulcich. There's a very good chance both of them are still live in week 17. And even the weather, that's the only, even though it's in Denver, and that's my big thing with Cleveland and the Jets is the weather. I find that Denver, even when the weather's bad, it normally isn't that cold. And you don't get that kind of wind. The other game that I like to stack up that's pretty cheap is the Colts and the Raiders. 2 bad defenses.
Yep.
Your thoughts on those 2?
Yeah, I love the Chargers Broncos. I have that as my 5th best game stack in my article here. I do have the Jets and Browns at 4. Yeah. The Raiders, it makes sense. I agree with you. Those defenses are both horrible.
And it's a dome game. And it's a dome game.
And it's a dome game, right? Yeah. Those 2 teams individually, I'm not very excied about. So I guess I haven't landed on that game stack as much, but it does make sense.
Which is why I like it because the best sneaky ones sometimes have reasons why you're off it.
So are you taking Garoppolo, or is it more Richardson side and then some pieces of the Raiders?
It's more Richardson.
Okay.
But again, I don't feel that you need to have quarterbacks to stack, right? Yep. So I am looking, I'm looking for secondary week 17 stacks, 3rd, 4th, 5th. And, I am more than happy to take, Devontae Adams with Michael Pittman, who I think has fallen too far. His 7th round, Michael Pittman. Richardson is an upgrade on Matt Ryan. I know he's not the most accurate guy, but when he does throw it, he's either completely misses you or he puts it exactly where it needs to be, and he's got a great arm. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm with you that Richardson, it probably will be an upgrade over the Ryan we saw last year. My concern why I have not been drafting much of the Colts passing game is just how run heavy they're going to go, right? I mean, it's Shane Steichen. We just saw what he did with Hurts and the Eagles last year, even with an efficient quarterback in Hurts and a great pass catching core. I think the Colts might be super, super run heavy, and that can be fine for Richardson, because he's going to be part of that running game. But, is there going to be enough volume to support these wide receivers? That I'm not sure about.
I think that the defense is bad.
Yeah, it is.
And I'll throw out one other thought, because I thought a lot about this, because a lot of smart people like yourself have been saying run heavy, run heavy. Mm-hmm. The Eagles had the number 1 offensive line in the NFL. he ran because he could, right? I don't know that they're going to be as effective running the ball. And if they try and just sit there and show run and run, I don't think it's going to be successful. So I at least think there's what I like to call sneaky upside there.
That's a fair point. And the Eagles, of course, were playing with leads all last season, which the Colts probably won't be, which will mean more passing. So that's probably a good point. When we look at stuff like neutral pass rate or pass rate over expected, the Colts are probably going to be near the bottom of the league. But when we just look at straight pass rate, they could be closer to the middle of the pack just because they might be playing from behind in a bunch of these games.
And at the end of the year, maybe it loosens up more if they're 5-10, 5-11. It's just, but we talked about a key thing earlier in the show, and I'm going to go back to it, about challenging yourself in a good way. That's why I love conversations like this. And it's a big part of why I started podcasting, because it's a way for me to check my thoughts in a one-on-one environment with someone I respect, rather than some kind of weird Twitter war. All right. So next question is breakout players. You did something on breakout players for this year. Not only do I want to know who the breakout players are, but I'd like to get a little bit of background on what you consider the criteria for a breakout player.
Yeah, I mean, I want to pick guys who obviously haven't quote unquote broke out yet, right? And I think there's different ways to define that. I definitely want guys who are still going late enough in drafts where they present value. Like I can think a guy's gonna break out, but I'm not necessarily gonna highlight him if I don't think he's coming at a value in drafts. So those are the two big things for me. Treylon Burks.
Tyreek Hill might need to break out.
Yeah. Well, Tyreek Hill breaks out above what he did last year.
I'm in prison if he goes. It was a bad joke.
But sorry. No, that's on me. That was a good. Treylon Burks stands out as my favorite breakout pick this year. And he's been a victim, I think, of what was just an incredible rookie class last year, because he was not as good as Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave or Drake London. But Burks, amidst the injuries, because he did have a bunch of injuries that kind of, stunted his growth and really, kind of made him tough to ever rely on in fantasy lineups. But he did have a pretty efficient rookie season. 1.75 yards per route run for Treylon Burks last year. That's a well above average mark. Now, again, it's not as good as Garrett Wilson and Olave and London, even Christian Watson. But just go back the year before to 2021. Look at some of those rookies. So again, Burks, 1.75 yards per route run last year. In 2021, Jalen Waddle, rookie year, 1.75 yards per route run. Same exact number as Burks. Amon-Ra St. Brown as a rookie, 1.74 yards per route run. Devonta Smith as a rookie, 1.73 yards per route run. Burks is in that range. So I think it was an encouraging rookie season, and there is just no target competition in Tennessee. Like I think should claim a 25% target share, which is a nice number for a wide receiver. And like there's upside for him to get up to like 28, 29, 30%, which is a truly elite number. So I think,
and he's the type of guy who can do a lot with a little too.
For sure. Yep.
No, I love that one. He's one of my favorites. Who else?
I like Jeudy a lot. Again, when I make these Chargers Broncos stacks, it's, Jeudy and Dulcich, who I'm kind of running it back with on that Broncos side. Jeudy, another guy, kind of like, we talked about Njoku with the injuries and even Burks with the injuries. Jeudy, I think, had a better season last year than people realize. He missed, I think it was like 3 full games and parts of 2 others with injuries. But in his 12 healthy games, his scoring averages in those games would have been 13th best among wide receivers in PPR points. It would have been 14th in half PPR. Jeudy has also improved his yards per target, his yards per route run, his PFF receiving grade in each of his first 3 NFL seasons. I still think he's on the way up as a player. Sean Payton should be a massive coaching upgrade in Denver. It really comes down to Russell Wilson, right? If he can bounce back even just a little bit, I think Jeudy and really that Broncos passing game in general should really have a big year.
Yeah, and I also very much like taking Marvin Mims and Tim Patrick late. I think both of those guys at their ADP that will have if Russ can regress back to not sucking, he always was great at dropping in the long pass. And if he can start doing that again, both Patrick and Mims are perfect for that. I like those calls a tremendous amount. Let's move over to sleepers. You had 8 sleepers. And while I tend to put my audience to sleep, I think I want to hear about your sleepers.
Yeah. That article's on Draft Sharks, and I've kind of made it like a living, breathing article. I'm going to keep updating it throughout the summer. I'll probably add more. I'll probably take guys off that list as I either kind of fall out of love with them, or if they just climb in price too much. So definitely continue to check that one out. But yeah, I have one per position again here. I actually don't have a quarterback on that list yet, but at running back, I like Rashaad Penny.
Late quarterback is tough.
It is tough, yeah.
Late quarterback is tough. Go ahead. Did you just say Penny?
Yeah, Penny.
One of my most injured players last year. One of my most owned players last year.
Always, and that's the thing. I in general fade the injury prone label. And look, Penny's, it's earned with Penny. Maybe the guy he just can't stay healthy. Some guys are like that. But he's going late enough where even if I get 10 games out of him, I'm fine. He has truly been an elite runner since he entered the NFL. 5.7 yards per carry over the past 5 seasons. That's second best league wide over that span. He's 4th league wide in yards after contact per attempt since entering the NFL. So like he's doing it, beyond the blocking. Remember, Penny was a 1st-round pick too. Like he's a talented guy. He's just obviously had the injury.
He won every one the big best ball prizes 2 years ago.
Exactly.
Not that far away from where he's going. I was fading him because of the uncertainty, but lately I've been hitting him more, and weekly winners been loading up on Penny. Love Penny and weekly winners.
Yeah, and listen, DeAndre Swift is obviously an issue. But again, you look at most of these advanced metrics, and Penny's just been better than Swift as a ball carrier since they've been in the league together. Now Swift's obviously the better pass catcher. How much is that going to matter in Philly, right? Like they don't throw a lot.
It's more of a Gainwell issue than it could be a Penny issue.
Right. Yeah. And even Gainwell.
No, what I mean is, if you really think about it, Penny is the best at that 1st and 2nd down role.
Yes.
And Swift and Gainwell really overlap. And because of the uncertainty, all 3 of them are cheaper than they should be. I think you could make a rule where you want one of the Philly wide running backs in probably 60-70% of your leagues, because one of them is going to have a great year, and they're all so cheap.
No, yeah, that could definitely work. And by the way, my last note on Penny,
I haven't been doing it, but it could work.
Me either. I haven't been drafting much Swift or Gainwell, especially on Underdog in the half PPR. But I probably should start mixing them in. My last note on the Eagles, though, with Penny, despite all the touchdowns that Jalen Hurts scored on the ground last year, the Eagles running back still combined for the 3rd most rushing touchdowns last year.
That's I think
there is double-digit touchdown upside for Rashaad Penny.
And they're only running him from like the half-yard line. They're not running that play from the, But go ahead, go with your wide receiver and tight end too. I've been extending this.
So I like Nico Collins as a sleeper at wide receiver. He really took a nice leap forward in his 2nd year last year. His target share climbed from about 13.5% as a rookie to 20% last year, a pretty nice number for a 2nd-year wide receiver. Collins' yards per route run climbed from 1.24 to 1.68 last year. That was 37th among 96 qualifying wide receivers. And then it's just a massive quarterback upgrade that I think he's getting with CJ Stroud there. And listen, there's targets to go around in Houston too. I know they added some guys, but they also lost Brandon Cooks, who, led the team in targets last year. So I think Nico could, even grow that target share to, 22, 23, 24%. And if he does that, and the Texans are even, a league average passing game with CJ Stroud, which I think they could be. I think Collins can, score as a wide receiver 3 this year, and he's still going at wide receiver 5 level price.
Tight end?
Jelani Woods is going super late. And my concern with Jelani Woods is Anthony Richardson. And as we talked about, how run heavy they're going to be. Which, you kind of warm me up to the idea that maybe they might pass a bit more than I expected, which makes me like Woods even more. But another guy who it was not a huge sample for Woods last year, but he did flash when he was on the field, especially late in the season. Woods actually ended up with 1.51 yards per route run last year, sixth best among 22 qualifying rookie tight ends over the previous 5 seasons. The 5 guys ahead of Jelani Woods on that list: Mark Andrews, who's obviously become a fantasy stud; Chris Herndon, he flamed out; Noah Fant, who has been a solid fantasy contributor; Kyle Pitts is ahead of Woods on that list. I still think he is going to be an elite fantasy producer for a long time. And then Chig Okonkwo is ahead of Jelani Woods on that list as well. And we could definitely talk about Chig quite a bit. But I think it was a really encouraging rookie season for Jelani Woods, especially considering he was considered a raw prospect coming in, right? He was more just this like big freakish athlete who wasn't expected, I didn't think, to do much as a rookie, but he showed me a lot. I think he has a chance to become the clear lead tight end this year. And again, if they throw it enough and if Richardson is good enough, I think Woods could be a stud. He could even be someone who just like kind of out of nowhere scores 8 times just because he's so big and athletic.
Yeah, I said on multiple pods that Jelani Woods is the guy who's drafted late, who, if he ended up being a top 5 tight end, it wouldn't shock me, right? He's got that skill set. I'll also throw out Isaiah Likely. It's unlikely that he gets there without a Mark Andrews injury, but Todd Monken ran a lot of 2 tight ends at Georgia. And, I'm not a big one for blurbs, but twice Lamar Jackson, when asked about his favorite targets, Likely's name got in there. So I think both of them. That's why I said I'm not. It's harder for me on Njoku because there's just so many late tight ends I think have the upside. Christian Watson is another guy that is really polarizing that you talk about a lot. He's priced as if he is going to go off this year, but he has a new quarterback. That quarterback really looked like a bust up until last year, and he scored a ton of his touchdowns through a ton of his fantasy points through touchdowns. Yeah. I like Watson. I don't think he's a guy you can fade, but give me the upside case where, like you really love him, right?
I do. I think I'm with you when you say that I think he's like fairly priced, right? So even I don't have a ton of Christian Watson because I think he's kind of priced. Like if I'm on the clock and he's kind of there in ADP and he's the top guy, like I'll definitely take him. But I don't think he's undervalued. Now he could still beat his. I think he's like wide receiver 20 in ADP. He could definitely still beat that. The reasons I like Watson, and as you said, he definitely overachieved in the touchdown department last year. He's going to regress there as far as touchdown rate. Even the yards per catch and the yards per target, that stuff's probably coming down. But Watson fared very well, really, for any player, and especially for a rookie, in yards per route run and in targets per route run. He was second best among last year's rookies in yards per route, behind Chris Olave, but ahead of Drake London and Garrett Wilson. And then in targets per route, he was third among last year's rookies, behind London and Olave, but again ahead of Garrett Wilson. So, based on what we saw last year, I'm buying Christian Watson long term. And that doesn't mean he's going to deliver this year, because as you said, the quarterback play is a question at least, and maybe a concern if you're not a love guy. But Watson's just a guy I want to be in on in general, just based on his talent and again what he showed us last year.
Yeah, what I rarely do is take him as my quarterback 1. He tends to be a guy that I will take if I already have 1 to 2 other receivers who are going to give me a floor. I've talked about this a lot. Early in drafts, you should be getting both floor and ceiling, right? As the draft goes on, the reason those players are not in the first couple rounds is because they lack one of floor or ceiling or opportunity, perhaps. Watson, because of his spiky nature, I tend to like to put him on teams where I don't need him every week. So that's kind of a little trick that I call advanced best ball. Jared, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I like that. That makes a ton of sense. And I do think Watson is going to be that type of high weekly ceiling, but low weekly floor player. I mean, Watson's interesting too, because I was below consensus on him last year, like especially from a dynasty perspective. And my take was always I saw him as a boomer bust prospect, right? Like it wasn't like I didn't see the upside. I just thought he had a chance to just flame out. And again, this goes back to being willing to adjust your takes on guys. Just for me, Watson, seeing what he did last year as a rookie, I'm now leaning much more towards the boom part of that profile than the bust part of that profile.
All right, let's finish up with 2 running backs. The first one is a guy that I'm completely out on in James Conner. Do you want to tell me why you're on him first, or do you want me to tell you why I'm not?
I want to hear why you're not.
All right, so it seems like what's that famous meme from Star Wars with the fishy looking guy? It's a trap. It's a trap.
Oh, yeah.
The run and shoot, and not the run and shoot, the air raid offense that Arizona ran is historically from college everywhere. You would think 4 wides, not a good running back scheme. It's a fabulous running back scheme. They also gave him the ball near the red zone a lot. I think it's a bad team. I think he's an inefficient runner. And I could see plenty of weeks where he gets 15 carries for 35 yards. They're behind, and he's also been injury prone. I like your point earlier that I don't worry about injuries either when it's like Penny's injuries, these major injuries. The guys, though, that are always nicked up worry me. So that's why I'm out on Conner. Tell me why I might be wrong.
Yes, I'm with you on a few of those things. I mean, the injury history is obviously there, and I don't think you can expect him to play anything close to a full season. I do think the Cardinals offense is not going to be very good. So we agree there. And the spread offense, Kingsbury point, is a good one. I think generally my rebuttal to that would be twofold. One, the offense wasn't good last year under Kingsbury. So I have no idea what this new OC, Drew Pensing, is going to be all about, but I don't see it being a big downgrade from Kingsbury, because I don't think he was a very good coach for Arizona. Again, that offense to me kind of underachieved. And the second point with the spread offense being good for running backs, Conner didn't produce last year because of efficiency. As you said, he was not an efficient runner this year. Last year, I'm not even expecting him to be an efficient runner this year. To me, he's just a pure volume play. In his healthy game, he had 11 healthy games last year, which again goes back to your point where we can't expect to get a full season out of this guy. But in his 11 healthy games, 15.2 carries and 4.8 targets per game. Do you not expect him to get that level of volume when he's healthy this season? I just don't know where else that work's going to go.
Well, that's one of my favorite things to fade. The logic of, well, who else? Because we know that, on one hand, there's this whole genre of Twitter of running backs don't matter. And how many times have we seen teams find running back? Like, what's a Zonovan Knight, right? Like, all the Carter guys from the Jets were just sitting there going, well, Breece Hall gets hurt, Carter's so Breece Hall gets hurt. Carter wasn't very efficient. And then some guy named Zonovan Knight came off the taxi squad and got more work. So I try not to bet on that. I get the volume. Yep. I just think this offense is going to be different. And I don't know that they'll throw as many screen passes. Maybe they will. But I'm willing to go down because what I don't see is the upside. I see the floor that you're talking about. What I don't see is the kind of ceiling that I can get from other players in his range.
No, yeah. So, I mean, one, I totally agree that the where else is the volume going to go argument can be dangerous. My point with Conner would be, I mean, one, he's been in the NFL for 5 or 6 years, and he's been like a quality back. So this is not some guy that's like never done it and they're just going to give him the ball because that's all they have. The other note is his contract, and he signed his deal a couple years ago, but even for 2023, Connor has about $8.5 million in total cash. That's the 11th most among running backs. So like they're paying him, and that matters to coaches and front offices. Like they want to get a return on that investment. And again, it's right now it's Keontae Ingram and Corey Clement behind him on the depth chart. I just think when Connor's healthy, he's going to get similar volume to what he got last year. And again, just going back to last year in PPR points per game, he was 7th among running backs. His ADP right now is RB 28.
And so that's fair. I think I'm going to give you this one a little bit. I don't know how much more I'll be taking of him, but I do. There's no doubt that is a very, very fair point. Let's finish up with Rashaad White. Another similar kind of situation where he looks like he is the only guy there. Thoughts?
Yeah, and this one is more dangerous. Even I've kind of gone back and forth on White and how much I want to be in on him, because kind of the reason he shows up high in my projections and most rankings is because there's no one else there, and we're kind of expecting him to get the majority of that work, which definitely could be the case. I mean, he was a day 2 pick just last year, so I think the Bucs probably do just want to see what they have in this guy. White was not good as a runner last year, though. 3.7 yards per carry. I know the O-line in Tampa stunk, but White in these advanced metrics we look at, yards after contact per attempt and rush yards over expected per attempt, all that stuff, White was just not good. So that's a concern. He was, though, good in the passing game. He caught 50 passes as a rookie running back. He did fare well in yards per route and PFF receiving grade and all that stuff. And remember, White looked like an excellent pass catching running back prospect coming into the league. He had a big final college season as a receiver, caught 43 balls in his final college season at Arizona State. So I do feel comfortable that he's at least going to dominate the pass catching work there. We'll see about the ball carrying stuff. We'll see how big of a step back that offense takes without Tom Brady. So there are definitely concerns with White, but he's another guy, RB 26 in ADP. And like, he has a chance to get, 260, 270 total touches. And if he does that, that's all he needs to do. If he does that at that price tag, he's going to be a big value. You're muted. Todd, you're muted.
Completely agree with you on White. I think that he is, he's a tough one for me because, again, he goes off around where David Montgomery goes, who I like a lot, Elijah Moore, and I'm also Javonte Williams starting to come around a little bit later. But Jared, I thought this was a fabulous episode. I love the way you brought in the numbers to justify everything. I'm a big fan of yours. Tell those who might not know where we can find you and your work.
No, yeah, Todd, thanks for having me on. I always love talking with you. I will be going back through my projections after this discussion to probably make a few tweaks here and there. So I appreciate it. You can find me on Twitter at Smola DS, and then all my written work and podcasts and most importantly, projections and rankings are up on DraftSharks.com.
Yeah, and I'm going to have to get your partner on sometime before the season ends too. It was literally a coin flip of who I asked first. I really respect the daylights out of both of you. That's going to do it, folks. I really appreciate having Jared on. And we are now doing all the shows live. You will see next week, we'll have the link for the YouTube up before the show. So thanks to Jared. I also want to remind you to look for Warren Sharp's book on Amazon. That'll be coming out soon. And we do have a price, $29.99. So a lack of preparation on my part, but it really is simply the best analytical 2023 football preview you can buy. There are some free chapters out there. The New York Giants is one of the teams. I think the Lions was the other one. That is it. My producer just told me he got the graphic during the show, so I don't feel as stupid. Thank you, Adam. And Adam is our new producer to the show. He is an amazing addition. Really looking forward to working with him. Next week on the show, we have, we've got the live show coming up on Thursday of this week with John Daigle. So check that out. And next week, Scott Barrett. So really jam-packed. And one of these days, I'm going to write an ending to the show that's as smooth as the beginning. So I'm just going to say goodbye.